Hello and welcome to the third module, which we are going to focus on DNS in Sandbox, and this is the very first video, which is about DNS resolution as you see the file here. We are going to focus on how Sandbox resolves the DNS query. And for understanding, because the DNS kind of in Sandbox is the most confusing part, at the same time fascinating one. We can do so many things with the DNS in Sandbox, and it's really amazing this opportunities that gives us so many features with that, but it has a cost of confusion for understanding the DNS module in Sandbox. And I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, slowly build the component and parts of the DNS and showing the kind of behavior that Sandbox has for the DNS resolution. Also, you learn not just about Sandbox, many things else about the DNS itself and the foundation of DNS queries. So we have the log, nothing fancy is here. The inbound, excuse me, we have one inbound, one outbound direct, and nothing else. So super simple and super easy. And if I dig for ip.me, it gives me the IP back, and my DNS server is my router gateway, which I have here. Name server 192.168.2.1. And that's it. We are going to run Sandbox. We do not need sudo, and it listens on 2080 as a mixed proxy. So we query to that 2080, and Sandbox has to resolve this domain name for connecting to. So if we request, it's going to resolve that. So it's going to resolve that. What is being used here is the DNS server on my machine. So if I change it to, for example, 3333, which doesn't exist, this address, and I rerun the Sandbox, it doesn't know how to resolve that. So it doesn't know, and my machine doesn't know either. So they can't. I mean, the whole thing on this machine, nothing can be resolved because I don't have a DNS server. You can say timeout. You can see the timeout here. So let's keep it here. I mean, do not change it, and this not valid DNS server. We go to Sandbox, and we define our very first DNS server, which is the DNS object, the top level one. And then we have a one single DNS server defined, and since we have the very first one, this is going to be picked up. The first one is going to be picked up by Sandbox for resolving the DNS with this directly connecting to the Cloudflare port 53. This is default. I can remove it, or you can have it here. Now if I run Sandbox, because internal it has a DNS server, query over that is going to work. It's going to resolve because we have Cloudflare defined. But on my machine, it doesn't work. I don't have a proper DNS server configured, which means if we want to not rely on host or the client on Android or Linux, it's always a good idea, best practice, to define a DNS server on the Sandbox configuration that we have, so Sandbox can use that. So, and if I change it back to my local one, right now the host is working, and Sandbox is working as well. But we know that the priority is the Sandbox itself. It uses the Sandbox, not the host. How can we test that? We go to the DNS server that we have, and we add a not valid DNS server like 1.10.10.1. Because we have defined the DNS server in Sandbox, it doesn't use my host DNS server. So let's test that. The host is okay because mine is valid. The Sandbox doesn't work this time because the Sandbox DNS server is not valid, so it doesn't work. So if we define that, which is incorrect, it doesn't work. If it's a correct valid one, it's going to work. And this is the very basic thing about the Sandbox and the DNS resolution. we shouldn't rely on host. If we have a reliable host DNS server, we do not need to define this DNS object. If we define that, this is going to be picked up and it has more priority or precedence over the host DNS server we have. This is the very first configuration that we have, because we also can have, and most of the time you have a tunnel interface for having a full tunnel, and the sandbox behavior in that manner, I mean using a tunnel interface, is a little bit different. Let's test that as well, part of this DNS resolution.